Hello everybody, thanks for coming along to this afternoon's webinar about how to be and not to be a good mentor and a good mentee. Thanks to Mark Rooney for that Dr. Seuss inspired title. Today's webinar is one of a series of webinars that English Australia is running this year that focuses on support for new teachers in recognition of the fact that there are a lot of new teachers in the sector at the moment. And obviously mentoring is a really fantastic way of supporting new teachers. We're really lucky to have three presenters from three different English Australia member colleges with us today. And all of these presenters have some experience in mentoring teachers. So we have Matt Murphy from Phoenix Academy, and he's the academic manager there. Phoenix is a college in Perth. Mark Rooney, who's the program leader at Monash College English Language Centre in Melbourne, and Jackson Howard, who's the manager English language programs at Western Sydney University, the college. Really nice to have some representation from around the country as well. Thanks so much for joining us today. And I'm going to hand over to Matt now, who will get us started. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, thank you very much, Sophie. So my name is Matt Murphy, and I'm an academic manager at Phoenix Academy in Perth. Phoenix Academy is a pathway provider. We currently have about 200 academic English students preparing for university study in Western Australia. We also teach general English, vocational training, particularly business diploma, some corporate training and teacher training as well. We run both CELTA and Delta courses here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the mentoring program here at Phoenix, and I thought I'd start off with this quotation. Oh, sorry, Mark, thanks. So it's a quotation from Benjamin Franklin. "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn." So I think this quotation, especially the latter part, involving me, really encapsulates what I believe is important about any kind of mentoring, and I think hopefully how we approach it here at Phoenix. So I'm going to divide my brief talk today into three sections. Firstly, I'll explain the rationale of the mentoring program here. Secondly, I'll highlight some key features of the mentoring program. And lastly, I'll illustrate some advantages and pitfalls that might be of use for other institutions who might be thinking about setting up similar type of mentoring programs. So firstly, the rationale. Are allocated a mentor on commencement of their employment. So our mentoring program really is a kind of follow-on from the induction program. It takes part at the beginning of a teacher's employment here, the formal part of the mentoring program. And the purpose really is fourfold. Most broadly, continuous improvement and innovation, making sure that teachers and classroom practice is always at a high standard and is always improving. Secondly, classroom practice and content. So we found that this has been especially important in recent years. During the pandemic, we switched to a hybrid model of delivery, and we're still using this. So there's a lot of technology to come to grips with, even for experienced teachers. And this can be this can create problems in the initial stages of employment. We also found coming out of the pandemic in the second half of last year, as the restrictions, the heavy restrictions to the borders here in WA especially, started to ease. And we were in a position where we were recruiting a lot of new teachers quite quickly as well. So it's very important to put in support for them. Thirdly, supporting ongoing professional development through dedicated and regular discussions on practice and methodological approaches between mentee and mentor. And finally, to enhance communication between academic staff, management, and also administrative staff, to enable the effective and timely resolutions of any potential issues that might crop up during the initial period of the teacher's employment. So I'd like to move on to some of the key features, the mechanics of how the mentoring process works here. So as I mentioned, all new teachers go through an induction, of course, and that induction, part of the function of that is to serve as a needs analysis to help us identify what knowledge gaps period. A 4-week flexible and individualized mentor program would begin. So that's the formal part, but the mentor relationship, of course, can continue in a less structured way beyond those 4 weeks. So what does this mentoring program involve? It involves weekly meetings between teachers providing to students and to moderate assessment grading. We have a checklist system that is used in these meetings. Also, lesson observations. So the mentor will sit in on a number of lessons. These are not really assessments, but they're very much constructive and supportive observations. At the end, the teacher will complete a self-evaluation of how they think that lesson has gone. We have a mentoring spreadsheet on which the meetings are logged. And the mentor, in addition to the formal meetings, is somebody who will be available, someone who the mentee knows that they can approach informally at any time in the first 4 weeks for a coffee, for lunch, any kind of quick questions. They don't know who to turn to. They can just go and ask the mentor anything. They'll try and answer, or they point them in the right direction to somebody else who can help. Finally, at the end of the 4-week period, mentees complete a feedback questionnaire about the program, and we use that to inform professional development sessions and to improve mentoring in the future. So finally, I wanted to highlight some advantages and pitfalls involved with this program. I think perhaps the main advantage is that it provides a very supportive framework for new teachers, and new teachers will have, of course, different levels of experience. Maybe some teachers straight out of a CELTA course, it might be their first teaching job, but we also have teachers who have 20+ years of experience, but they still have certain gaps in their knowledge, so it enables us to address these. Secondly, of course, good practice is encouraged, I think, by a mentoring program. So, for example, the self-evaluation that we encourage teachers to do at the end of observations. This is a really good practice to continue on in regular teaching, I think. Thirdly, it really allows any problems to be nipped in the bud, to be identified and addressed as quickly as possible. Fourthly, this relates to the first point a little bit. This flexible approach recognises that teachers do have different expertise and experience. Perhaps also I can say here that while the mentor program is primarily designed for the mentee's benefit, I think it should be regarded as a two-way learning experience, and the mentor themselves can gain a lot through the discussions, through the interaction with the mentee as well. Finally, helping to identify gaps, learning gaps, experience gaps, which can inform future PD sessions for the whole of our staff. Then pitfalls. So it is a flexible approach, and that is good because it can be tailored to the different needs of teachers. But then the flip side of that is perhaps that less experienced mentors might be less certain of, say, the sequencing of what should be covered in the 4 weeks. So that's something to be aware of. And then perhaps with any mentor program, it could potentially lead to an overdependence of teachers or mentors. Of course, going back to the Benjamin Franklin quote at the beginning, this is not the planned outcome, but again, it's something to be aware of and trying to make sure that the program really kind of empowers teachers to be equipped with the skills or to know where the resources are to continue their development. Okay, thank you very much. That's all from me.
Thank you, Matt. Hello, everybody. My name is Mark here at Monash College, and I, first of all, want to echo everything Matt had to say there about the importance of mentors for a school. In my conversations with Sophie earlier in the year, we discussed what does the industry need at the moment, and part of the focus we looked at was mentors, because we found that there was so many new people coming into the industry after COVID that they were kind of being thrown in at the deep end. So we thought there would be a real need for mentors this year. Now, I'm going to give you a little chat about mentors, and then after Jackson, I'll give a little chat about mentees. But I thought I might be able to give you some good tips on how to be a mentor. Now, I don't know about you, but I've given up thinking. I just let ChatGPT do all my thinking for me now. So about a week ago, I asked ChatGPT to tell me what are 5 tips for mentors. So I had a look, and ChatGPT is, I hope we all know what ChatGPT is, because it's coming for us. And he gave me all these tips, which are all really good, sensible tips. You know, establish clear expectations. I totally agree with that. Listen actively. Yeah, I definitely think mentors should listen actively. Offer constructive feedback. I would hope mentors would do that. That seems like a fundamental part of a mentor's role, give constructive feedback. Be a role model. Who can argue with that? And encourage growth and development. Totally agree. ChatGPT, I agree with you. The best tip, though, I've got about ChatGPT as it comes for us is type in a question, see what it says, and then don't say that. And that's the way you can be original in these times when the AI overlords are coming for our jobs. Just use them as a guide for what not to say. So I agree with everything ChatGPT says there, but I am going to say some other things. These are my 4 tips for being a good mentor, and I'll go through them one by one. And hopefully it can add a canon of answers on what it means to be a good mentor. So my first one is, a mentor is more than just a good colleague. So here at Monash, and I'm sure at your institution, we get new and novice teachers coming through all the time. And I love it when it happens. It gives me a higher sense of humanity as I see our experienced teachers take those new teachers under their arm, show them around the building, show them where the photocopier is, where can they find the stash of colored paper, who should they avoid in the staff room. I love it. I love to see all that. However, my eyebrows are raised when I see the experienced teachers thinking or mentioning that what they are doing is mentoring. It's not mentoring, you know, it's good to show people around, to be nice to them, to welcome them, but it's not mentoring. It's you're being a good colleague, and I support that. I'm in favor of good colleagues, but mentoring is more than that. Mentors are interested in helping other teachers become better teachers. Mentors have something to say about teaching. They have opinions and questions and beliefs, and they've reached a stage in their career when they believe they have something to offer others, that they want to pull other people up instead of just charging forward on their own. And of course, a mentor should be nice and show people around and help them see where the photocopier is. But it's more than that. You know, they are more than just a good colleague. A mentor should be a catalyst for the professional development of the mentee. It's a sacred role, and it's more than being a good colleague. That's my first tip for all wannabe mentors out there. Second, don't make duplicates. Okay, so maybe you're a really good teacher. Are you really that good? Does the industry need another you, another 10 yous? Maybe it does, but do you want another you walking around? I mean, let's not be in such a rush to replace ourselves. It's a cliche, but it's true that we are all on our own path. And the reason we're on our own path is because we are all a complex mix of strengths and weaknesses and interests and indifferences. However, sometimes I see in the mentor-mentee relationship. I can see the mentee is going down a path, and the mentor says, "Oh, no, don't go there. Come this way. Come this way with me." And they're sort of bringing them down their path. I would say to most mentors, you are not the archetype for great teaching, and your autobiography is not like a roadmap of how people should teach. The mentee should be encouraged to go down their own path. They don't need to follow yours. Of course, your career and your history should be interesting to the mentee as an example of what a career path can be like, but not what it should be. So I think we need to remember that when we're supporting mentees, that our job is to help them understand their strengths, their weaknesses, help them uncover what they believe their interests are, or what they don't care about, and why these things happen. I think a mentor needs to help them organize thoughts about where they want to go and allow them to stuff up and go where they want to go. In fact, you should let the mentee do the exact opposite of you, not the same as you, and you should let the mentee be better than you, to do the things you don't do and be successful. Because a mentor shouldn't make another them. They should make someone better than them. So don't make duplicates. My third tip. I would say to mentors, I think it's better to model curiosity than it is competence. So mentors don't have to have all the answers, and I think they will be better equipped with a good set of questions. Sometimes mentors can tie themselves up in knots trying to justify an unsuccessful lesson or becoming defensive when they don't know the answer to a mentee's question. But nobody has all the answers, and by pretending you do, it seems disingenuous and it gets spotted pretty quickly. I think mentors will serve their mentees better if they model curiosity. If they model that they are still on their own path of discovery and they're still intrigued by the things they're finding out. Good mentoring should be based on meaningful conversations, and meaningful conversations should be based on probing questions and authentic, honest answers. You know, good mentors question themselves more than anyone. And in my experience, the best mentors are never self-conscious or defensive because they know that errors and mistakes are normal. They're natural. They're supposed to happen. Mentors know that it is the questions that drive us forward. It is the questions that show us where we need to go. And answers only tell us where we are. And that's why I think a good mentor will model curiosity much more than they'll model competence. And my final tip for mentors out there, don't smother them. Ideally, mentors should say the right thing at the right time in the right way. Good mentors have a knack for being there when they're needed and disappearing when they're not, and knowing the difference between those two times. But I understand that's hard to do. And sometimes you don't even know when you're doing it. It's just an instinct you've developed over the years to when to step in and to step out. But in the interim, the wrong thing to do is be there all the time for everything. Swooping in to save your mentee from the horrors of getting something wrong. Don't be a helicopter mentor. No, it doesn't help the mentee. It just smothers them. And another way we can smother mentees is by just loading them up with too much information. I've seen mentors sometimes say, you need to do this and this and this. Oh, and if they don't work, then you should do this and this and this. And if you have problems, those first two suggestions, I will maybe do this, this, and this. And it's, for some mentees, it's death by 1,000 caveats. It's counterproductive. It's confusing and overwhelming for the mentee. And ultimately, it sends the wrong message. It tells them you can't deal with any issues if they arrive. But your mentee must experience discomfort. That's how they grow. I understand it's hard to know when to give support and when not to give support, and it likely depends on the individual and the circumstances. And it's a really difficult line to travel between nurturing and smothering. But a good mentor is interested in finding out where that line is for the mentee. You know, it can frustrate the mentee and send them the wrong message if we are always helping them with their mistakes. It will stunt their growth. So, as a mentor, try and find that right level of freedom and support so that you don't abandon your mentee, but you don't smother them either. So that's my final tip for the mentors out there. There they are there. Now, I'll talk to you a little bit later about some tips for some mentees, but first, let's hear from a mentee. Jackson, please let us know your experiences.
Thank you so much, Mark. Yeah, my name is Jackson. I'm with the College, Western Sydney University English Language Programs. And it's been really interesting to hear you talk about that, and Matt also talk about a more formal mentoring process. I think a lot of fear is associated with your job when you're coming in as a new teacher. And I've taught in a few countries around the world and been the newbie in a bunch of new schools. And it's been interesting for me to reflect on that journey, being mentored in those places, because some schools have formal programs that are great, and some of them had less support for me as a new teacher coming in. And so I wanted to reflect on that and why we should be less fearful and why we should choose to embrace being mentored or being a mentee. And I've got 3 points that I'll touch on, particularly, I think, for younger teachers or newer teachers coming into our industry, realizing that mentors can be everywhere, and that we need to embrace those people who we want to learn from. In doing so, through our self-reflection, it's an investment in ourselves, in our personal and professional development as well. And that it's a type of learning that is quite different to the more theoretical, conventional type of learning that we get from a textbook, in that it's a lot more experiential and practical. If you could pop those animations on the screen there too, Mark. Thanks. So I'll be touching upon those points briefly. But first, I suppose I should draw your attention to the stock photo at the bottom of the screen, and there's going to be a few of those in the next few slides. I'm a little bit more old school than you, Mark. I didn't go to ChatGPT for information about a topic. I love to go to Google image search, because I find that it gives me a perspective on the perceptions that people choose to shape around a concept. And the smiles and the styles of these stock photos that you get when you Google image search mentors, I found to be really revealing, because they touch on a very limiting aspect of mentors. So if you move on to the next slide there, Mark, here's a couple more. And if you just take in these perceptions that perhaps mentees, new people coming into a role or looking for leadership, apparently perceive mentorship as, you can see that it's quite a formal thing. The attire of a lot of image searches for mentors and mentees is really formal, to the point where you may be carrying a satchel or some sort of work bag. And otherwise, again, there's more smiles and styles as we have these formal but not so formal conversations where we're laughing a little bit. There's also a lot of the looking over shoulders. Apparently mentors love to do that as well at a computer screen. But I suppose what I really want to touch on here, and it flows into my first point, is that that there are perceptions of mentorship that I associated with fear, that I found to be a bit limiting, that it could only occur in the four walls of our workplace as a mentee, and that it had to be something where I almost, like I was, asking someone on a date when I was 13 or something, like, would you like to go out with me? Like, would you like to be my mentor? These are some of the perceptions that still seem to be associated with mentorship. So if we move on to that first point, the fact is that there are informal and formal mentors in all walks of life, and there's always, for whether you're associated a buddy when you start a job, like with Matt, or it's someone that you choose to sort of model yourself on, or who shows a willingness to mentor you. There's someone for everyone. That's something I had to realize through my job so far, is that and they're not always the same. And at different points of my life and my work life, I've gravitated towards different sorts of mentors. And they weren't always just people that I wanted to model my work life and my career on. They were people that I wanted to model myself personally on as well. And I think it's important that we just disassociate mentorship with work, although we're all here because of our job. They're also in other parts of our life. An informal mentor was probably my brother. I wouldn't have gone to him to learn how to have fun on a Saturday night, but he's someone who really did, just through my association with him being my older sibling, was someone who was willing to show me how to grow as a person, how to handle my finances. And then I had more formal mentors in the sense that they were my manager, or they were someone who was associated with me, like Adamir Cortez, who was my Director of Studies at English Language Company back in 2015, when I first became a senior teacher. He modeled a lot of the good habits that Mark pointed out. He probed my curiosity. He was someone day in, day out who was my boss, but he was really willing to show me how to become better at management and how to handle certain situations. So I'd kind of convey that to newer staff, is it doesn't always have to be formal. There are lots of different types of mentors out there. Moving along, the thing that I also learned from Adamir and Lynn Scott and David Scott at English Language Company in Sydney as well, that it's very empowering when you reflect on what you're doing and you say, hey, I want to be better at this. Or sometimes your students tell you, yeah, I'm going to the toilet, and they're not back for 20 minutes. And you're like, okay, I need to work on this part of my teaching, for example. When you do that, you're spending time, you're investing in yourself. That's very powerful. That's really important. And so when you reflect on that and you think, hey, I've seen this person, they do this really well, or I'd like to learn from this person because I think they handle these sorts of situations really well, that's an investment in yourself professionally. And the benefits can be great in your personal life too. It could lead to less strength. It could lead to more happiness outside of work because you're happier at work, and vice versa. So one of the things I would really impress upon anyone who's looking for advice and looking for help is reflect on what you want and then find somebody who's providing that to you and either formally ask them, could you give me advice and mentor me on this? I've had people say that to me before. Or spend more time with them after work, have a chat with them in the staff room, get to know them a little bit better, because that investment in yourself will just really pay off. You might even be presenting in an EA webinar about it one day. That's how big it could be. Lastly, I'll move on to this final point here, and another great stock photo that comes up when I search mentor, is that you can learn from a book, you can learn from an online course about aspects of teaching and management, but also if you're mentored, you can actually also practically and through experience learn something as well, because the very act of being mentored and being shown how to do something or talking about a particular situation often flows into a personal experience or you actually having to go through that. So lastly, I would say that it complements theory. Rather than just having one or the other, I think being mentored along with learning about whatever it is you want to improve on can be really powerful and really helpful. So Mark, I wonder now if you want to completely contradict everything that I've said, or whether you're going to agree on a little bit of it as well. Thank you.
Absolutely not, Jackson. I fully agree with everything you said. And isn't it great to hear it from the mentee's perspective? I don't think we do that enough. We don't consider what the whole process is like from the mentee. And regarding your photos are beautiful. And for those of you who didn't spot it, all my pictures today have been generated by artificial intelligence. So if they look a bit weird, that's why I got DALL-E, ChatGPT's picture generator, to generate these pictures. So if they feel a bit freaky, that's because they were made by a robot. All right, let's have a look at some tips to be a good mentee. Okay, ChatGPT, what do you have to say for yourself on this particular topic? Give me, I started using the imperative with ChatGPT because we're familiar now. 5 tips for mentees. And It's pretty sensible what it said. So if you can't see, be open and honest. I think a trainer and mentee relationship is built on trust. Don't disagree with that. Set specific goals. Yeah, you should have some goals. Mentees should take responsibility for their own growth. Hard to disagree with that. Be receptive to feedback. You'd hope a mentee would be receptive to feedback. And follow through on commitments. So if you promise your mentor you'll do something, you'll do it. Very sensible advice for mentees. But I'm going to try and say something different. These are my tips. These are my tips for mentees, and I'll talk through them one by one. All right, the first one to mentees is watch more than you listen. Your mentor is probably trying to figure things out as they're explaining them to you. As I mentioned earlier, they don't have all the answers. In fact, sometimes the mentor-mentee relationship is their way of figuring out what they think and what they believe. Often, if you listen to the mentor, they'll tell you the things they want you to focus on. But the problem is with that is that they're not focusing on the things they don't want you to focus on, which might be the things they're trying to hide. But it also might be there's things they're really good at that they don't know they're really good at, and therefore they can't explain it to you. But a good mentee doesn't just listen. They watch their mentor and they learn from the experience. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I was working alongside someone, maybe I was the mentor in this relationship, and I went out and I gave this lecture in front of 50 or 60 students, and afterwards she came up to me and says, "It's so clever what you do with those jokes." I was thinking, what do I do with the jokes? I don't know. What do I do? Was I offensive? Did I come across thinking I was funny, like I was a comedian? She said, but then she said, "I watch what you do. You tell the joke, and based on the reaction, you pitch your lesson up or down. So if you say something and most of them laughed, you keep on that level. And if you say something and it's crickets, you sort of grade your language down and grade the content down." And I went, yeah, I do that. I had no idea that's what I did. Then over the next few weeks, I noticed that's exactly what I was doing. I'd been doing this for years, and I often wonder, well, why am I telling jokes all the time? And I've realized that it was my little way of getting feedback. Now, it was my mentee who told me that. She spotted it, and she said, I'm not funny, but I'm going to find other ways to gauge interest and engagement throughout the lesson. So she was able to see something that I wasn't able to tell her. A good mentee should listen to what the mentor has to say, but watch them. Watch what they do. Watch what they're afraid of. Watch what they're not good at. Watch what they're brilliant at. Try and figure out what they think by what they do, not just by what they say. So watch more than you listen. And also ask more than you tell. I often see in these articles about the mentor-mentee relationship, you'll see a lot of articles that say, oh, it's a two-way relationship and mentees shouldn't be afraid to mentor upwards or reverse mentor. The mentor has as much to learn in the relationship as the mentee, so don't be afraid to speak up and say what you have to say. Yeah, okay, maybe. I'm here today to say something controversial. Mentees, go easy on the reverse mentoring. Increasingly, I see mentors becoming frustrated with the mentorship process, and they're finding themselves paired with mentees who are often too quick to adopt an adversarial position, to argue the toss on everything. And I get that the pupil can outgrow the teacher, but it usually doesn't happen in the first 2 weeks. And maybe, mentee, you're better than the mentor. Sure, that could be true. But like I said, with the mentors, why don't we all just model curiosity more than competence? If there's something that your mentor does that you don't fully agree with, it, ask questions. You know, get to, oh, okay, why did I do that? Why did I not do that? Don't be so judgmental about what they do. And of course, if a mentor is not giving you what you need, is not asking you the questions you want, is not directing you in any particular direction, ask them questions. This is the best way for them to figure out the path you're on. So if you don't want the mentor to turn you into a duplicate or try to turn you into a duplicate, ask questions of them, and that might be their way of figuring out what way they want to go. But please ask more than you tell. It will keep the relationship a little bit more productive. Mentees, you don't need a guru. Some of us, so the opposite, some of us are quite, our mentors frustrate us. They're not giving us what we want. Some of us have the opposite effect, that we're so desirable of a mentor, so hungry for a North Star in our teaching, that we can ascribe expertise and wisdom and genius to people who don't possess or claim to possess those qualities. Mentors don't belong on pedestals, and they're not much good to you when you put them there. Maybe your mentor is incredible. They're exactly who you want to be. You're willing to let go of parts of your own character to be more like them. They have poise, they have wisdom, they have tact, they say the right things, they know things other people don't know, they're very charismatic, or maybe they're just very charismatic, and all the other things aren't necessarily true. Sometimes we can get blinded by the charisma of a smile or someone who's cool in the room. But if you feel yourself glowing in the presence of your mentor, if you think they can do no wrong, it means you've probably elevated them to guru status. That's not good for a couple of reasons. First of all, they'll let you down because they'll never be able to live up to your standards. And when they let you down, you'll be left with a hollow in your North Star. You'll say, well, if my mentor is not what I thought he or she was, where does that leave me in all of this? The other reason it's not good to have a guru is if you're following, it just means you're going to follow them down their path and you're not going down your path. If you think they have all the answers, you're not going to be asking questions yourself. Remember, the good mentors are the ones with the good questions. They won't have all the answers. So you don't need a guru. And finally, say thanks later. I would hope that all mentees at the end of a mentorship period would say thanks to the mentor. I think that's just good manners, and I don't think that even needs to be said. But what I would say is, say thanks again much later. A mentor's lesson often only blooms months or years or decades after the mentorship relationship. Sometimes it takes us a long time to absorb the message and to action it. So personally, I can think back on lessons I learned 10, 15 years ago that I'm only realizing now, that I only realized, wow, he or she, my mentor, really got that right. At the time, I didn't understand, but it's really making sense now. And even though I didn't understand it at that time, they've clearly put me on a different path. It clearly had an effect on me. And when you have those moments, I urge you to email them or write them or approach them and say, thank you for that thing you did for me 5, 10 years ago. I urge you to do it today. Think of someone who was an important mentor in your past. Dig out their email, go give them a text message and just say thank you. It means more than you think. I've received these years later and I've given them years later, and it really makes all parties feel better. It keeps that sacred mentorship alive. It makes us realize that it is more than being just a colleague, that the mentor-mentee relationship changes people's direction. It is our humanity that drives us forward. So if you want to support that humanity, send them an email. I did it with ChatGPT. I just put it in there and I said, write a heartfelt wasn't very heartfelt or meaningful. Write something from the heart, tell them something that really gets to the humanity of the mentor-mentee relationship. And that's my tips for mentors and mentees. I'll give you them up there. There they are there. Thank you for listening. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thanks so much, Mark and Jackson and Matt. Found myself smiling and chuckling a lot during those presentations. So really wise words, but also, familiar situations, and brought home the fact that when there's two personalities involved, in a staff room, it's always very complex and rich dynamic. I also really liked that tripartite perspective that you gave of the mentor, mentee, and the institutional perspective as well. So thank you so much. There are a couple of questions in the Q&A, as well as some lots of thanks in the chat. So David has asked, do you provide training for mentors in how to be a good mentor beyond just procedures? And if so, what are the most important elements of that training? So happy for any of you three to jump in and answer that question. Matt, do you go?
Yeah, I can say a little bit. We don't have any formal training for mentors here. I mean, I guess that would be something like mentoring the mentor, perhaps.
Yeah.
Uber mentor, which would be a good idea, of course. You know, I think in the role of a mentor, there's always more learning to be done. So we know we don't have any formal training beyond maybe an academic manager might discuss our mentoring policy, might share some of the documents that we have, mentoring checklists, mentoring spreadsheet, maybe look at mentoring feedback from previous mentees, things like this. But I think probably the most important thing is, you know, a kind of a willingness to share one's experience and views and with colleagues, and an openness as well. I think I would really echo these points being made of curiosity, both on the part of the mentor and the mentee as well.
Yeah, great. Mark, did you want to add to that?
Well, the only thing I would add is that we don't at Monash really have any training for mentors at the moment, specific training, but we do have things like a community of practice for mentors where we all get together and discuss. I think this year we're having a greater focus on that. But I do think about it as a thing to do, but a thing that's hard to do. So it's definitely food for thought for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think sharing challenges and experiences with the community of practice would be a really good way to do it. Neil's asked another question, and I was wondering the same thing. He's asked if you have any problems recruiting mentors to your program. So Matt, for you, but also Mark and Jackson in your centres. And if there's any encouragement for mentors to participate in the mentoring beyond, you know, professional pride. Matt?
Do you want me to say something about that, Sophie?
That would be great.
Sure. No, we haven't really had any problems recruiting mentors. I think generally people are often happy to be asked. I think, I mean, of course, there is professional pride. I think people are often willing to share their expertise and their knowledge. And I think, yeah, I think there's, you know, hopefully a recognition, this idea. I mean, we've talked a little bit, different people today on the mentoring from the mentee. I think from a mentor's perspective, if there's a willingness to kind of learn from the mentee as well, then it can be a rich and rewarding experience, and they can perhaps learn surprising things about themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Jackson or Mark, would you like to add to that?
Jackson, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll try to add 2 cents. I think it's, no, I don't think we've had difficulty recruiting people to that sort of role. A lot of people tends to come naturally. I think in terms of when people are, I'm thinking from the mentee's perspective, I guess. Here we've had, you know, people are interested, people are very happy to share. I don't know if that's just because of the people we've recruited or because of the experience people have. One thing I would say is if your staff feel supported, in that, then they're more willing to give their time. And if we take into other, because that's something that comes up, is time and remuneration. But I think if people feel supported and are willing to have their workload shared in other ways, and you take into account that those people are mentoring and are sharing their time to do that as part of their job, then people will be more willing. Whereas if we say do that, and on top of that, do all these other duties as well, people may be a bit more reluctant.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jackson. It taps into another question that Jeanette had asked about time commitment and if that's off-putting for mentors. So yeah, I think really recognising that mentoring is a time commitment and then not overloading people with other duties as well is a great idea. Mark?
Yeah, I might add something to that. So at Monash, we don't really have problems getting people to sign up to be mentors.
Oh, that's good.
It's not a huge problem. There's a line you have to be careful, and I think it comes across with what Jackson and Matt was saying, and it comes into the remuneration question. Once you start paying people to do it, then it becomes a job or a duty, and it doesn't become an honourable thing that happens and a part of your career progression. So that can be a tricky one. And sometimes it can be this perception that when you encourage teachers to be mentors, some of them might think, oh, you just want me to do your job for you and take care of all the new staff.
Okay.
And my sort of opinion is we want to promote it as a social good for all people. It's if it doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world, but it's for everyone's benefit and for your benefit, for your career, for it to happen.
Yeah, so it's creating that culture around it. And I think if you've been a mentee in your life and got something out of that relationship, then it's an honour to be a mentor in a sense as well.
Yeah, and the formalizing of it can be tricky sometimes because it turns it into sometimes something it's not.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of the questions. I think I'm feeling like I want to go away and write some letters, and I'm sure there are some other people here who are feeling the same way. So maybe we can all toddle off and do that. But yeah, thank you. It's been a really rich session just to have your perspectives and your expertise all in the one room, so to speak. And a really great topic, super useful at the moment. So thank you so much to our presenters, and thank you everybody for coming.